The fifth episode of Surviving Earth is officially out. This one is called When the Forests Collapsed. It takes place about 305 million years ago during the end of the Carboniferous. The extinction that we're taking a look at is the collapse of the Carboniferous rainforests, a point in Earth's history where global temperatures started to cool and the climate became a lot more dry, which caused a lot of the Carboniferous plants to simply die out. And the loss of that habitat saw the extinction of many different types of animals. I quite liked this episode. I thought that it was really cool to spend as much time in the Carboniferous as we did. The Carboniferous is not shown off as frequently, even though it is certainly an interesting time in Earth's history. And man, it was shown off beautifully here. The Carboniferous has never looked better than it does right here, with just vibrant forests, vibrant and lush and just full of life. It feels like there's always a creature sound in the background. It looks like an actual living Carboniferous forest. I know that they actually built full-on sets for the Carboniferous portion, and that certainly shows, with some extinct plants making an appearance. All of this makes the forest feel like it's familiar, in the sense that it's a forest, but once you look at the finer details, it looks incredibly alien, which is probably how the Carboniferous would look if we went back in time to look at it. So it was just amazing. In my opinion, this is the best that the Carboniferous has ever looked on screen. And so far, I think this is my favorite environment that they have portrayed in this show. Now, obviously, a lot of creatures make an appearance in the Carboniferous portion, and that was awesome. I'm glad that we didn't just look at like one or two creatures and just follow them for the duration of this. It was great to see like diverse creatures all just kind of doing their own thing, surviving in the end of the Carboniferous rainforests. One of those creatures was Dendromaya, which is this interesting little creature right here. They call it a reptile, which is probably not true. Now, the group that Dendromaya belongs to has been debated for a while, with some researchers in the past believing that they were more closely related to reptiles and might even be reptiles themselves. But currently, it seems like they were synapsids, which means that they're a bit more closely related to us. So calling them a reptile in the show would definitely not be accurate, especially if that holds up. But that's not the worst of it. We'll get to the worst of it later in the video. We also see Ariops, which was this huge Carboniferous amphibian. Man, they were so cool in this. Their design was fantastic. I loved the colors that were given to them, and the whole skeletal structure just looks really spot on. They had some really cool like mating behaviors where they go into the water and create these ripples, like these low rumbles to create ripples in the water, which I believe is something that some frogs do today. Again, just a 10 out of 10 design. We see some griffin flies flying around. Really liked their colors. They seemed a little bit more vibrant than they typically are, which I thought was a nice touch. The beautiful Arthropleura makes an appearance. I love that giant millipede. It had a fantastic design. Unfortunately, it didn't have the eye stalks, which I'm sure that the only reason why it doesn't is because of when that discovery was made and when this documentary was being produced. So I'm definitely not going to hold that against this documentary. The design still looked fantastic. Orthocanthus makes an appearance, which is a type of freshwater shark. It looked amazing too. Surprise, surprise. But pretty much all of the designs in this show are amazing. It goes after a Diploculus at one point and unfortunately gets trapped and gets stuck there and dies. But speaking of Diploculus, the beautiful Diploculus makes an appearance in this documentary, and it's like we get a lot of time to spend with this Diploculus as well. I love Diploculus. Diploculus is easily my favorite extinct amphibian because just look at it. It has a boomerang for a head. How can you not love that? Its design, as per usual, looks amazing in this. This is pretty much how I always picture Diploculus in my mind, with the boomerang head being connected to the rest of the body and just a very slim amphibian-like body in general. It lays eggs in this episode, and eventually those eggs hatch, and it seems like the baby Diploculus are like baby axolotls, like actual footage of baby axolotls. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I think that's what I saw, which I thought was cool. I thought that was a really interesting route to take. But seriously, the Carboniferous portion was just a huge highlight for me. I really, really, really loved this segment. It was just a real treat to dive into a point in Earth's history that not many people talk about, or that not many people are shown, really. And just looking at it in such a way that makes it feel like it's so full of life, at least until the forests start to collapse, of course, which we do see that in this episode. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, the changing climate does cause these forests to sort of die out, and that, leads to the death of many different creatures. We then jump 20 million years into the Permian, where we get to see, of course, the amazing Dimetrodon that has the best design of any Dimetrodon to ever show up on screen. The colors are just fantastic on this creature, the texturing, all of the proportions, everything just looks very much like a Dimetrodon, and I just absolutely loved it. It was so cool to finally see it. But one major complaint that I have is that they called it a reptile. Dimetrodon is not a reptile. Dimetrodon is a non-mammalian synapsid, which means that it's more closely related to mammals than it is to reptiles. Just because it looks like a reptile doesn't mean that it's a reptile. And I understand that sometimes dialogue can be placed into a show to make it easier for the audience to understand. I completely get that. But this is a documentary, and documentaries are supposed to be educational. And so I think it's up to you to make sure that you provide the accurate information and, provide it in a way that they can understand. There are ways that you can explain that Dimetrodon is not a reptile with potentially not making it confusing. Like, my mind automatically goes to, this may look like a reptile, but it's actually more closely related to mammals, which, sure, that might be kind of confusing to some people because it's like, how can it look like a reptile but be more closely related to mammals? I get how that could be confusing. But I'm sure that it's at least a step in the correct direction because, simply put, Dimetrodon is just not a reptile. And they called it a reptile a couple times in this portion, which is just a little bit annoying, if you ask me. But we do also see a Codylorhynchus, which is this handsome fella right here. Codylorhynchus is also a non-mammalian synapsid, sharing closer relation with mammals than with reptiles. It was just so cool to see it on screen and actually moving around, eating plants, acting like an animal, especially from a creature that I've only ever really seen art of. I've never actually seen an animation of one or anything like that. So that was also just a real treat. But yeah, all around, like I said, I really did like this episode. There are some problems with it, like I mentioned. I've noticed that one of the biggest problems with this show so far has been some of the dialogue, which is, I'm noticing a common theme with some recent documentaries is that their dialogue is sometimes a problem. Like, if you look at Prehistoric Planet Ice Age, a lot of times they don't clarify what part of the world you're in, or a lot of times they don't clarify what creature you're looking at. If you look at the dinosaurs on Netflix, they're one of the biggest problems that I had with that show was the dialogue and the fact that they were explaining things in such a vague way and kind of like over dramatizing some events. And now this show also has some issues with the dialogue and the fact that they're just completely calling creatures the wrong thing, I didn't realize it until the Triassic episode where they call that little mammal-like creature, I can't remember its name, it escapes me right now. They called it a mammal, but apparently it's not a mammal, and I didn't know that until someone brought it to my attention after the episode. And they've done it a few times since then, and one of the biggest ones right now is, I'd say, calling the Dimetrodon a reptile, because it's just, we've known for quite a while that Dimetrodon is not a reptile. At some points, they were called, like creatures like Dimetrodon were called mammal-like reptiles, but that word choice has fallen out of favor like a while ago. The best word to call them is stem mammals or non-mammalian synapsids, because that acknowledges the fact that these guys are more closely related to mammals, but they're not true mammals themselves. They're also just not reptiles. Like, they're just strictly not reptiles. It's always a confusing topic for some people, and I think that it's a great opportunity to help clear some of that up in a documentary like that. And sometimes they just don't do that. And I do completely understand that the focus is not on phylogenetics in this show or evolution. Rather, this show is focused on extinctions. I get that. But that doesn't really give you an excuse to call them the wrong thing. And maybe it's a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but I am a science communicator and I try to make sure that people learn something. And I feel like a documentary, which is meant to be a form of science communication, should do that too. Anyway, small rant over. Again, I did like this episode. I thought this is probably one of my favorite episodes that we've seen so far. I really liked the Carboniferous section. We saw way more creatures than I thought we'd see, and that was a real treat. But that's pretty much all I have for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode. If you guys enjoyed this show, or if you want to talk about it further, be sure to leave a comment down below. But until next time, thank you for watching. Have an awesome day.